Are we up and running?
All right.
All right, we're back experiencing technical difficulties. Fortunately, we have a doctor here. But we're talking about PJ Dozier, and I want to get into this because there's a lot to talk to, a lot of information here. And people can come back and watch this after the show if they miss it or whatever. But so we're talking about PJ Dozier and just the frequency of adductor injuries here. Where were we at?
Yeah, so what happens with adductor injuries is when you externally rotate, which means has your foot outwards. And then what happened with him is he stopped really fast in what's called eccentric contraction. There's a lot of jargon I'm throwing out, but basically he's stretching his muscle really hard, but it's working at the same time, and that's why he had a strain, which is a muscle tear. It's just not it's not a full tear. That's what a strain means.
A partial tear.
Yes.
Oh, can I ask you something? Is grade 3, because there are 3 grades, is that just what we would call a full tear?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And grade 1 is.
Does it come out that's what he had?
No.
Okay.
Gosh, no, I was just
MRI
asking.
results said strain. I
Okay.
believe. So which means they usually report tears if they see it.
Okay. So what is the time frame for these ones usually? Because we've seen some guys have taken forever.
Yeah. So in Gary's case, I actually thought a little longer because he's a guy who takes longer to get back from injuries. I think he has a lot of hip things going on. PJ's case, usually what happens, there's Curry's suffered these injuries. There's actually paper on it right now, but it on average is 14 to 6, I should say 2 weeks to 4 weeks, that window.
Oh, man.
And so
4 weeks is like the season's over. The playoffs are also either over or they're under the second round.
Mm-hmm. Right. The one nice thing is that everyone who's come back from adductor injuries have come back at full strength.
Is there a risk to rushing it back too quickly?
There is the risk of the full tear, and then he's out.
How long would that take, a full tear?
Think of Will Barton. So
he just never really seems to have come back.
Never really come back. Yeah.
Was his a full tear?
His was, I believe, a full tear.
Wow.
That Phoenix game, yeah.
So if you're PJ Dozier and you're still trying to get your big payday, you're probably looking at this and going like, man, I'd love to be there for the playoffs, but I'm not doing the Will Barton where I'm out the whole offseason and go into a contract year next year and I'm not healthy.
No, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I really don't feel like it's worth it at that point. Just for your future looking forward, like when you look at guys like Isaiah Thomas, for instance, you rush it back and then you never can be back the player that you once were. And you risk it for what? Like you don't even know how far you would advance or how far you go. So I wouldn't want to do that.
The Nuggets are now in this very weird position of their attitude is rightfully so. The goals haven't changed. You push forward. But, Malone sort of talked about it today. Like, there is a risk of the harder you push, the worse things can get.
Right.
And things can get worse from here. So it's not a great place to be in, obviously.
If we go now, let's do the hamstring. We'll finish with Jamal Murray, but we talk about the 2 hamstring injuries, Will Barton and then obviously Monte Morris. I had a hamstring injury once in college, and it sucked. I played through it, though, because I was not a professional athlete. I was like, well, what am I going to do, not play? But they do seem to be, when you get hurt there, you just never know when you're ready to get back. And if you come back too soon, you don't know it till you hurt it again.
Right. And, hamstring is tricky because this is more of a pain-related, but your function is completely reliant on this, how much you can tolerate. And this is all your explosion, your propulsion relies on that hamstring. This is, and it could be all related to his knee, to his adductor
With Will
injury,
Barton, you're saying? Oh, yeah.
Monte, maybe just from the wear and tear. But
this is what happens, right? I mean, guys get injured one place.
Right.
And, unless you get a full off season to recover, and even then, sometimes as you're just getting older, you get hurt one place, you start to get hurt another, then you get hurt another, and then you're done.
Right. Does the team have an understanding of the window as soon as they get those results, or is this the type of thing where they have to see how he responds to sort of getting back out there?
It is a person-by-person basis. It is how much they can tolerate. And in Will's case especially, we need to take extra care because he's come back. When he came back back too early and wasn't a shell of himself.
Man, what is a typical time frame on a hamstring strain?
The way he went out, I was immediately thinking at least a month with him. Yeah.
How many weeks has it been for him? Has it just been the 1 week for Will Barton?
I feel like almost 2 now, right?
2 weeks. So, I mean, we're still, we're looking at maybe coming back into the playoffs.
Yeah.
But how does a player stay in shape if you can't use your hamstrings?
You have to stretch, dynamic stretching. You have to work around there, your quads, the calf, and doing the hip exercises as much as you can around there, as much as you can tolerate. And slowly, we're going to what's called eccentric exercises, where you slowly work on that hamstring. That's the best way to strengthen it.
But in shape, though, because I'm thinking, here's what I'm thinking. If Monte and Will Barton come back in the playoffs, or even if they come back in 3-4 games and get a couple games in,
right.
I imagine they've lost a lot of conditioning.
Lost conditioning, lost their feel of the game a little bit.
Yeah.
It's going to be cluster.
How much conditioning does an athlete lose in 1 month? A super athlete like an NBA player.
Yeah, super athlete. You even saw Will was trying to run with that torn adductor. So they're still running on the treadmill and stuff and trying to. But, yeah, for NBA shape, you even see Anthony Davis. It takes at least a few weeks to get back in that game shape, depending on the length of absence.
Does a training staff have anything to do with like a person recovering like faster or better, or do they have any bearing on someone's injury?
So it helps. Of course, it helps. If you're knowing some of the newer rehab techniques, knowing the players well. I think Augie is like strength and conditioning coach, looking at what their deficits are and working on those. It does matter who the trainer is for that level, but it also speak to how Jokic is still 82 game, well, whatever, knock on wood player, but so it's all a mixed bag too, depending on the player as well.
Do you worry about Will Barton's long-term future now that he's had 2 injuries in basically 1 year?
Will, between Gary and Will, I was more scared of Gary, to be honest, of long-term. I think Will still has some time to show himself. He has the build. He has that history of never getting injured until that adductor tear. So I think we can still give him a little benefit of the doubt, but this is kind of that trying time, and he's in his contract year too. So.
Are guys really, I always wonder this, are guys actually injury prone? I mean, I know there's sometimes like mechanics, how you walk or this or that, but are guys injury prone, or is it, if you get injured early, your odds of getting injured late go up, and then then you're injury prone?
I think in Gallo's case, like there's a little bit of combination, but yeah, the earlier you get injured, the more likely we are to re-injure it. Jamal, I think, if we can segue into that. If you focus on the rehab, if you focus on getting the right strength routine in, there's a chance. And then focusing on bending your knees when you're landing or when you're pivoting, you make sure you don't tense your legs. Things like that, he has to retrain and
really
learn. Yeah.
When you say don't tense your legs, what do you mean? Like really focus on what your muscles are doing in these moments?
A little, yeah. For Jamal, I'd recommend like training just to offload that stress on that joint when he's landing, and then especially when he's playing. So that would help prevent future recurrence of tears. So
we it's funny when an ACL injury happens, because one of the things we heard was it was a clean tear. Yeah. What does that mean? It was a clean tear. There's not like weird.
That sounds like some team spin.
Yeah,
is that a real thing.
Clean. Well, yeah, because clean means I've done arthroscope before. You just see fully torn. It's not. There's no connection between that.
But is that worse? I mean, it feels like that was worse than if it's a dirty tear. That's better.
The dirty tear, the partial tear. I'd rather have a clean one.
Really?
I think these days, yeah.
Wow.
At least as an elite athlete, as a rec warrior, I think partial tear is nice. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because you want to get fully functional faster. It'll take a longer. Like he might be able to come back earlier next season, but he would not. There's always be some concern of a full tear, especially with the strain he goes through.
Okay. What about a recovery time frame? I mean, we've all been saying March just because it sounds like everybody says a full year. But what do you think is optimistic or likely?
Yeah, I would say around the late February, March time. I'm assuming he went to LA to get this. I don't know what he specifically did at UC Health. We tend to do these patellar bone graft surgeries where you take the patellar tendon with the bones at those arts and then use that as the new ACL. And usually that's a 9 to 12 month. It's 6 months for the patella to heal after you've resected it, and 6 months for just the stuff to reincorporate in there, and then that other 3 months to kind of rehab. Or
man, What are going to be the keys for Jamal to recover fully from this?
I mean, yeah, he has a good attitude about it. It's going to be the new training on how he's jumping, how he's moving. That's what will be key for him.
So it's really mental about retraining his movements to. Yeah. Did you feel like he had bad movements before?
I didn't. He just had an unfortunate planting on that left knee and hyperextended the knee, and was it related to that right knee soreness? It could have been. Right. I don't know if he was rushed. I wish we had a lead earlier in that game, and then we wouldn't have to ask that question.
Yeah. What about body strength? Are there specific parts of his body now that is going to be, especially focus on strengthening?
Yeah, so his hamstring's now going to be weaker with the ACL. That's off. His quad was stronger than his hamstring. That's what led to the tear in that initial thing. So he'll have to focus on deadlifts and, curls and all those. But
what do you think if he returns March? I mean, the season ends in April. If he returns in March, what are the odds that by April 15th next year he is 90% himself, 100%? What do you think we should be expecting?
Well, the one nice thing about him, he's a shooter. He's not as a D Rose, not as reliant on that explosion. Right. So that's a good thing. I think his shot will be fine. And I'd probably start with camping on threes to start.
Maybe next year he's a little bit of a different player. He's more of a spot-up shooter next year. Yeah. Gets a summer under him and comes back the old player.
Right. I wouldn't try to put him to defend any, those Dame Lillards anymore.
Is he going to dunk like he is a sneaky great dunker. Do you think he'll be back to? Is there any reason to think he won't be that kind of dunker?
He's done off with his right leg and left, so I think he can still dunk. Fine,
okay. So. Who's the most successful ACL recoverer in the NBA?
In the NBA the recent one that we can speak to is Zach LaVine.
That's a great one. He's still hyper athletic.
Springy as hell,
yeah. That's a guy that I think we can have some optimism there. There's some new techniques that they're using surgically that could help. I don't know if they did this in LA, but you can use some platelet-rich plasma to help the healing process, and that could also help. They may have done that as well.
Is there anything else we need to know about these injuries? I mean, the Nuggets are so short-handed now, and I'm not going to be you're Dr. Doom, if we're being honest. You came in here with the. I was like, so Monte and PJ are going to be great in 2 days, right? Probably not. So, but we also kind of knew. We kind of knew this was the seed.
So, I mean, I don't. Obviously, you can't put a number on this answer, but how, in 2021. How more or less devastating is an ACL? I mean, what approximate version of... Can he get back to 90% of who he was physically?
Yeah. I looked up a paper on this, on the recent data on this. 84% return to play fully active. They actually did PER stats on this. Within the first year, majority of them actually dropped a PER by a point the first year, and then the second year, there was no significant difference in their PER. So I would kind of go into the assuming 2021, 2022, he's not bubble Murray. He's probably 18 point per game Murray. And then 2022, I think, is kind of where he's kind of coming back.
Okay.
This is kind of the same thing with Michael Porter. Right. That surgery is kind of a 2-year window.
We should ask you about the Michael Porter thing. I mean, how this has been a thing we just haven't thought about, to be honest, partly because we don't want to think about it. But, that's why he wasn't drafted. Some people were like, he'll never play, and then obviously he played. But are we out of the woods? What's your take on Michael Porter?
Yeah, so that's what I specialize in the spine stuff. And L3, L4 herniations, when I saw that, and I saw that he just had discectomy. He's actually got a good prognosis, at least for his NBA career. At least, that's what I said. Scottie Pippen is a good comparison. 33, 34, 35, I think he could play till then. 40s, he's in trouble. I think he's going to need fusions or multiple surgeries or because of congenital stuff. But I think during his play here, that shouldn't affect overall.
That's interesting. So it's a thing that shortens the end of his career. But you could, you never know. But you should. There's a reasonable expectation of health for the majority of it.
Right. Yes.
Well, that's great. That's great to hear. I mean, it will be tough, especially for him in particular later on in his career, maybe shortening it. But 10 years from now, maybe medicine is in a new place.
Right.
So this notion, I mean, obviously you didn't get to examine him yourself, but this notion that Michael Porter Jr. was undraftable, I mean, was that out of left field? Was that fair?
Oh.
I mean, do you have any sense of that?
I was surprised by that. A lot of my colleagues, a lot of people I talked to have been saying, yeah. I mean, you have to be patient. You definitely have to give that year. And then by that second year after the surgery is when you start to expect performance results in the elite athletes. So I was kind of surprised that Clippers took Jerome Robinson.
Right, yeah.
That seems like the
He's
line.
not-
Like,
yeah.
is Porter worth
But you have
it?
to remember that I think it was known that he was going to need a second back
Right.
surgery then. It wasn't public, but I think
That's
it
a
was
great point.
known. And I think a lot of teams were like, man, if you need a second one, like,
Right.
we'll just stay away.
And drop foot issues,
And that
too.
was I was going to
Yeah.
ask the last one, drop foot. How long can you expect? He still wears the brace, so I assume he still has it, although it's never been reported. But
Right.
how long does that linger typically?
So yeah, that can be there from either the surgery from what he's been dealing with. That can be a complication. It can be rehabbed away. Like when I look for drop foot, it's your inability to lift your foot up, and so you still need that to plan to dunk, and he's been able to do that. So as far as I'm concerned, he's functional with it, and I'm not. Paul George had it, I think, at some point.
Okay.
After his.
But that can
Yeah.
that can go away. To be
Yes,
clear,
that can be,
doesn't
or
just
it could be
linger.
rehabbed away to a point you don't mind
Sure.
it. Yeah.
Can it come back? Can it be like a thing that it comes back and goes away and comes back and goes away?
I think my personal opinion, I think is more related to like during that perioperative period in that time. And I think if he's functional with it, I see the brace on and off at times.
Yeah.
Okay.
That I think he's okay from that point.
All right, well, Doctor, this was informative. We went over a bunch of injuries. You know, we had the technical issues that unfortunately cuts us short. So, Dev, you don't get to shine.
It's probably needed.
What bet?
Yeah, what
You want to know his one bet? Go for it. What's your one lock?
what
My lock of the game,
Julius
Yeah.
Randle.
Julius Randle. He's gonna go off. 24 points is not enough. They're drunk.
So if that's how you want to bet this one, listen to Superstar Dev.
The lock.
But thanks for tuning in, guys. Sticking with us. We'll be back in the post game show right after the game. We'll see you guys
Thank
then.
you all.